Everybody, hopefully you can hear me back there. Wow, Honorable Camarillo, what can I say? Very touching. Thank you so much for those kind words. Almost teared up. I honestly, everything I've done, everything I've done in the last 27 months in the job, I absolutely deserved or expected no credit for any of it. I was one thing I did want to do though. I did want to leave lasting change when I left. And if I was going to give up a very comfortable life in industry and come here, it was going to be an investment in the United States. Not in me, not for my career, but to truly leave something that had lasting impact. But I could come back, hopefully 10 years from now or 20 years from now, and still point back to something and say, hey, this is what we got done back then. And it's still here, and this is why we're here. And so my expectations coming in were quite high, personally for myself. I was telling Honorable Camarillo earlier that I had no doubt in my mind I could get the job done. This was one of those things that I knew day one exactly what I had to do. But how we went about doing it was going to be the most important thing. You know this very often. It's like there are a lot of smart people out there who can claim to do great things. But your approach you take and how you get it done matters. And that's the difference between how you establish irreversible momentum, how you leave behind lasting change, and something that's fleeting. And we've all been through leaders who had great visions in the Army and the DoD. We've seen great leaders come in, great vision, and yet if they're not able to bring everybody along with them, people just wait them up. And I knew that coming in. I knew how the building can react to a change agent coming in that's looking to leave behind or transform the Army in revolutionary ways, not in evolutionary ways. Coming in, I knew that the Army had already done everything we could to make ourselves more efficient. All the low-hanging fruit was gone. Every efficiency, every dollar we could squeeze out of the budget was gone. And yet, when we looked at where we were as an Army then, just a brief 27 months ago, we were not postured to take on a near-peer adversary. We had pockets of innovation in the Army, such as Army Futures Command, that was doing great things. But it wasn't at the scale at which the Army needed to move to truly make an impact. We were not empowering the workforce to enable them to innovate at scale. It couldn't always be driven top-down through certain programs or certain efforts or certain organizations. If you looked at how innovation happens in the private sector, it's grounds up. And we didn't have that. Technology, the barriers to adopting technology were pretty high. Anybody that wanted to get to the cloud, when they started to look at the process for what it would take them to get to the cloud, it would take them months. And we were expecting our warfighters, our soldiers to do this, because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. I remember, one of my early conversations with the chief, and he noted, Raj, the Army does a lot of things, but we're really here to do one thing, and that's to fight and win the nation's wars. And I remember that very, very clearly and distinctly, because at the end of the day, all of this IT, if it's not in support of the warfighter and the joint force and what we do there, it becomes nothing more than just back office. And I have seen in industry where I came from, where back office CIOs are not very successful. They're not at the table, they're not decision makers, they're not embedded in the business of the company, in driving business objectives and outcomes. So it was very clear that the Army needed to do something drastically different. And I pushed every one of you, I know this, I pushed every one of my members on my team and General Morrison's team to say, okay, we can be looking at just tweaking at the edges. We've tried that. It's now time for us to just wholesale rip and replace our thought process of how we've been doing things. And so a lot of people when I came and said, oh, Raj, you should, if you can leave the Army, it's a little better than how you found it, you've done a great job. And I told myself, no, it can't be just a little better. It's got to be orders of magnitude better. And that was the standard I set for myself. So it wasn't easy. And as I noted, where we are, the state of the art then when it came to technology, was just not there. The vision was there. I remember coming in, having my first conversation with Secretary McCarthy and then Secretary Whitley. You know, the vision was right on, with the Army needing to get to a multi-domain force by then 2028 or 2035. The importance of modernization, the importance of balancing that against current readiness, the importance about upskilling the workforce. But yet, you know, that first 2 months on the job, when I walked around, when I went around talking to people, nobody could tell me what role cloud actually played in that. Nobody could tell me what it meant to be data-centric, although we were using, you know, buzzwords and phrases like data is the new ammunition. We were all saying that. But really, when we look back and we started to peel the onion, it was not clear that anybody knew what they had to do. And then we looked at all of the risks and threats that we were seeing in the cyberspace, growing exponentially. And every new technology that we were bringing on was increasing our attack surface area. More threats, more vulnerabilities, more threat vectors, and an increasingly sophisticated adversaries and challenges, and the pacing challenge that we found with China. So that was the context for when I came in. And oh, by the way, you know, Honorable Camarillo mentioned this, walking in to be the first CIO with no job description. Okay, I'm sure none of you knew that. There was no job description. All the Army wanted was they knew they wanted a CIO. And oh, by the way, it didn't help when Secretary McCarthy and the entire administration left within 6 weeks, 7 weeks after me coming on board. But thank you, Honorable Whitley. It was a pleasure working with you, and you helped me transition in those first few months. It was hard, but it was also a blessing in disguise, because I got to meet some wonderful soldiers in the Army. I said, while I wait for the new administration to come in, what's important for me now is to build the relationships. And I mention this every place I go. The Army is a people business. We know that, we say that. But to me, for me to really understand and feel that, it meant that I had to go spend some quality time with our 4-star commanders and our 3-star commanders in the field. General Daly, General Garrett, General Cavoli, General LaCamera, General Mike Murray. I mean, I can go down the list. These were all the folks I spent quality time with. Because at the end of the day, if I wasn't here in the building to support their requirements and their needs and understanding their challenges, the rest of this was all academic. So it gave me good quality time to do that. And that was important for me to build those relationships, because I really wanted to get that operational perspective. Policies are great. Coming into a policy organization, especially at the Pentagon, where if all you're expected to do is put out policies and somehow expect miraculously that someone's going to go execute it, we all know that that's just not going to happen. That would have been a dream. So making sure that our policies truly align with operational imperatives and understanding how we're going to leverage digital for warfighting was the first thing I had to learn. And there was nobody that could really articulate that. And so I had to spend a lot of time correlating this to what I was used to doing in the private sector. I had to tell little easy to understand examples, like I used Uber as a simple example all the time. I said, you know, Uber disrupted the taxi cab market. Just think back 10 years. Didn't exist then, right? But it was a whole different model. They disrupted the marketplace. It wasn't just something, you know, it's like a hey, small new idea. Let's build a website to ask for cabs. No, or build an app. No. It was leveraging the cloud to actually integrate real-time data between drivers and consumers and pricing models, looking at traffic patterns, and all of that in a data platform environment with analytics and some quite sophisticated AI that we probably don't even know or care about. And that disrupted the market. It created a whole new ecosystem of drivers that didn't exist before. Everybody with a car now was driving around and, you know, That was the model. And for the consumer, it was great. You had plenty more choices. You didn't have to sit in one of those smelly taxi cabs anymore, right? But remember, I mean, it seems like we take that for granted today. But to me, that is what digital transformation did to that market. And it was a win-win-win for everybody. But could not have happened without cloud, could not have happened without a data platform, could not have happened without integration of real-time data. And then I said, we got to translate this to what this means to the warfighter. We used to throw the word decision dominance all the time at that point, and we still do. But to me, decision dominance, when I talk to people like General Donahue then, who was at the 82nd, and others, it was about how quickly that commander is presented with options in a multi-domain fight that included kinetic and non-kinetic options, and obviously with the preference to use a non-kinetic option before you fire a single bullet. And using data that's fused from multiple sources, including intelligence, real-time threat information, real-time situational awareness and understanding. And I said, wait a minute, that's kind of like what we get on our Uber app. Simplistically, you can go in there and you can pick Uber Black, Uber XL, Uber X, different prices, different wait times. But very, very simplistically, that's what digital transformation was about. And I knew what it was not about, and which is what we were always focused on the previous years. We had focused exclusively on building networks. And John and I, this is one of the first conversations we had. It's like, here we are, we're trying to get to a data-centric army, but we cannot get to a data-centric army if we keep talking about the network. Because the network and the IT and the software applications, these are all just enablers. At the end of the day, it's decision-making, the decision advantage, the decision dominance that our commanders are looking for, and these are just purely enablers. But that's not how, quite frankly, we fought in the last 20 years with counterinsurgency. And there was nothing wrong with that. That was what we needed for the last 20 years. That worked really fantastically well at the brigade combat team level. Our commanders there at that brigade combat team level had everything they wanted: the best comms, the best decision support, the best tools, the best weapon system platforms, but against, quite frankly, not a very technologically savvy adversary. But that's not the next 20 years for the Army. That's definitely not even today. And so this was the sense of urgency that I tried to create. The same urgency that drove me was the same urgency that I was trying to communicate to everybody else. We don't have 10 years to do this. So people ask me, why did you leave in 2 years? And I tell people this: I purposely wanted to work myself out of a job in 2 years. And if I had not been successful doing that, I have failed and the Army has failed. Because if we took any more than 2 years to do what we needed to get done, everything that we were looking about, everything that we had envisioned, just would not be able to come through. And so that was a sense of urgency. And we tried to bring everybody on board with us. Everybody. This was not going to be a CIO-led thing. The first thing I did was to reach out to the secretary and the undersecretary, as he noted. I was surprised to hear I was the second message he got. But I was so happy because, listen, how many undersecretaries do we know in the Department of Defense was as technologically tech-savvy as he is? He can go head-to-head, toe-to-toe with me on any one of these topics, and I love that. I love that. That's that force multiplier that we needed, that voice, that champion, that sponsorship in the front office. And the secretary, she got it too. It didn't take me very long for me to explain to her what data centricity meant and why it was important, and she latched onto it. She appreciated the fact that we waited to release the digital transformation strategy till she came along, and I did that on purpose because I wanted her to sign it. This was not going to be a CIO strategy. It wasn't going to be an IT strategy. All of that would have failed. It needed to be the secretary's digital transformation strategy for how she and the chief were going to transform the Army. That was the level of commitment and support that I got. It was about bringing every one of you on. And I want to start with Honorable Sherman. Listen, every single thing, John, that you and I did, we looked at it from the joint perspective. Why? Because anything else would be stupid. I mean, JAD C2, if we're going to say we're going to fight, we're going to do JAD C2 or CJAD C2, let's just not gloss over the J. The Army will not be successful. And we knew that. And every one of the things that we worked on, we made a deliberate attempt to say, okay, what's the rest of the DoD doing? What are the other services doing? And how are we going to align? Or if we're not going to align, positive friction is not bad. We're going to talk through it, and we're going to get to a good point. But I had a tremendous partner in John, because the culture that he set when he came in was, I remember the very first conversation, he says, Raj, my success is your success. And I told him, sir, that's exactly the approach I'm going to take. My success is going to be all your success. So he set the right culture, the right tone for that partnership. And quite frankly, I can tell you, and I mentioned this to him a couple of weeks ago, I can see another relationship between an Army Secretariat and a PSA at OSD as tightly as John and I have. There's not a day when he and I don't talk. There's not a day when, we can't talk about the hardest challenges we have, the friction that we have, but at the end of the day, we would get to the same correct answer. And that would be right